If you don't have the courage to be vulnerable, you'll never be a strong leader. A study by the Harvard Business Review found that leaders who display vulnerability are more effective at building high trust relationships, which lead to such greater collaboration, employee engagement, and really bottom line results. And it's interesting the meaning of vulnerability. It means exposed to the possibility of being attacked, harmed, either physically or emotionally. And sometimes that's what leaders actually experience, or it feels like it is to them. Like each day, leaders take risks, they expose themselves to potential harm, and leaders who play it safe are not strong leaders. And so really it's the opposite of weakness, this ability to be authentically, vulnerable. It really is a game changer. And there are just so many benefits for leaders who have the courage to be vulnerable, don't you think, Michelle?
Oh, without a doubt, Jan. And, mentioning the word courage
Mm.
is really important there, because you are definitely, you need to be brave if you're going to open yourself up and be vulnerable. And I suppose we grew up in a time, and a lot of people still think this, that, in order to be an effective leader, I need to be strong. I need to protect my people. I need to, lead from the front. And that, all of that is it, that's their definition of being brave. And it's like old school, old world. It
Mm.
just does not apply anymore. It's more about, leading from the heart. And if we look at let's just have a look at some of the benefits, I suppose, of, what it means to be vulnerable or to show vulnerability as a leader. And one of the things that, without a doubt, we've experienced firsthand is that it does build trust. You think, okay, so what's that relationship between vulnerability and trust? And what it does is that, so I'll give you a story basically. So there was a team, we work with teams who are in dysfunction. I was called in, it was an HR team. And our process is just to talk to everybody beforehand so we get, the lie of the land. And basically, they stopped trusting this manager. Now, what the issue was with this manager was that, again, the manager thought that they were protecting the HR team from, the very senior people in the organisation who started to criticise the HR function. And so he thought he was doing the right thing by protecting them. But in their mind, it was, oh, you're not disclosing information. You're keeping information from us. Only you're seeing the CEO. So that means that, you want to be, you want to have all the glory. There was no glory involved at all. So what we did is that I said, do you trust this process? Do you trust me? Which did help. And it was about, so share as much as you can without, disclosing information that, you shouldn't, about what was motivating you to be like that. And it was a game changer. It was like the jaws dropped. Was, oh, okay, it made sense. And because it was just so heartfelt and it was true, they got it. And it's almost like we could have shut the workshop down then and gone back to work, and it would have been okay, you know. But that was a real turning point, and that built trust just by showing that piece of vulnerability and the truth,
Mm.
about what I was. This was my intention.
Mm.
And so, I remember firsthand experiencing, right, I see vulnerability can lead
Mm.
to that deeper connection, because that's what it is, that then led to them, oh, okay, I trust you. I know what you were trying to do.
Yeah, yeah. Like the irony is that, like have a fear of vulnerability, and it kind of like often stems from that desire of leaders to be strong. And they're afraid that if they show weakness, that their team members will lose respect for us, show themselves as being incompetent. But we know firsthand that the opposite is true. And another benefit of vulnerability is increased creativity and innovation because it really encourages experimentation and learning from failure. And I remember working with a team, and what they decided is that they wanted to break this idea of hierarchy, and so they had a number of people who were graduates who they invited into their team meetings, their discussions, their brainstorming. They pulled people from different areas, and they actually exposed what their team was going through in this big project. Now, it could have been, and then it was vulnerable because they weren't hitting all the targets on their dashboard. But what they did is, because they engaged other members of the organization into the problem solving, it was amazing what happened and what information was drawn out because the leader was open and the team itself were willing to be vulnerable. And so they got, like such great innovative, because people were just pulling from different areas. And some of the research shows that I think there was a study published in the Academy of Management Journal, and found that teams with leaders who embrace vulnerability and mistakes are more innovative because members feel safer to propose novel ideas without that fear of criticism. And this is where, this psychological safety comes into it as well. And so leaders absolutely need to show and support that culture of vulnerability because it works.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, great. And so if we think of another, I suppose, a benefit is that, it can build resilience. It can lead to greater resilience within the team and the leader itself by showing vulnerability. And then you think, okay, so what's that link between resilience and vulnerability? And it's really about showing sharing your own limitations during times of change. So working with a team going through massive amounts of change, a lot of information coming down the pipeline. The leader didn't have the bandwidth really to share as much as perhaps she could have at the time. And when we had a few sessions where she did start to share the limitations of her own leadership, it started to build that level of resilience. And okay, so what are some strategies? And they started to actually share strategies as a team, as opposed to the leader feeling as though she actually had to lead with, well, these are the strategies we could or should be using. And there is just such a connection that is formed when you see in the other, who is your leader, who somebody, that has more power than you, and you see, yes, you are like me. And that's what this is all about, is I can see me, if I was in that situation, how I might respond. And that just, raises that level of connection, which then starts to build all those other things like trust. And as a team, you start to become more resilient,
Mm,
because resilience is about bouncing back. So
mm,
how quickly can we bounce back?
mm.
And when you do open up and show your vulnerability, the fact that actually I'm not coping as well as I could have, and I could have done this better, I am going to admit that I made a mistake. Wow, that really does change things in terms of building resilience, not only in you, but in your team.
Hmm. And I think for the leader, it actually models those adaptive coping strategies. And some of the research that came out of the University of Pennsylvania on emotional intelligence showed that leaders who manage their vulnerability effectively, so it's not all emotional, it's being able to regulate that, really
Mm.
contribute to a resilient organizational culture, because individuals bounce back from setbacks so much more effectively because they're actually seeing in real time how to self-regulate and the strategies that the leader is actually employing. Another advantage or benefit is authentic leadership, because vulnerable leaders are really seen as more authentic, they're relatable, they're more credible, and that they have more influence. And, how often do we are we engaged with organizations because leaders want to be able to have more impact and more influence. And we have seen this, and I have seen this when coaching someone and they had some 360 feedback and they were very task oriented. This leader was able to get things done, drive results. However, the wake that they left in the background with their team, and we found that there were a lot of people who were leaving the team. So a lot of information and really, like general capability was being lost. And when this leader had received feedback, was really open to changing and admitting that perhaps their style wasn't working anymore. What a difference this person's trajectory, just their reputation. People wanted to start to work with this person, and I think it's really important that this is all evidence based. Because another study, I think it was the Journal of Leadership and Organizational Studies, said that authentic leaders who embrace their vulnerability are more effective at leading because they are perceived as being more trustworthy and relatable. And as we know, Michelle, like that trustworthy is the linchpin of being an effective leader.
I couldn't agree more, Jen.
Mm.
And then, I think of, so what is another benefit, of being vulnerable? And it's not displaying vulnerable or showing like it is actually being. You need to embody this and
Mm.
be really authentic, as you were saying in this. And I have, and we have seen this, transform teams in terms of employee engagement when leaders can be vulnerable and show almost, a real genuine, authentic concern for their team members. And when you can, and so you think, okay, what is that relationship between vulnerability and team engagement? When you actually show concern for some team member, you actually are being vulnerable because your team member, and I've seen it happen, no, not interested, and shuts you down. Like you have, and sometimes you actually show concern by saying, I can imagine that this is because it is an issue for me, going through lots of change. We have to spill and fill the roles, da, da, da. And the person goes, no, not interested, and shuts you down. When you as a leader can, try and create that environment where all you can do is control how you behave in that situation and show, look, when I took a risk in this way, this is what happened. Then they start to say, I actually might be able to step my little toe in the water and then take a greater risk, which can lead to innovation, which can lead to sharing of ideas, which can lead to better engagement because everybody wants to be able to contribute and feel safe enough in
Mm.
order to take those little risks.
Mm.
So, just another benefit is that ability to, show real genuine concern and be genuinely concerned for your employees can lead to much greater engagement when you are
Oh.
vulnerable enough to share what's happening with you, but
Mm.
open up and ask them what's happening with them and be
Mm.
prepared for the answer.
Yeah, and like it just creates such a supportive network where
Mm.
people feel valued and understood. And one of the things, or one of the stories I wanted to share here, Michelle, is that one of the organizations that we both worked in, we did a leadership program, and one of the leaders really stepped up into his leadership and showed genuine, authentic concern for his employees. And this is an example of vulnerability. And one of the people in the organization died. And it was a mother, and they had a number of grown up children. And what the leader did is that he brought the team together. They had a discussion. They did a bit of a debrief. They were offered counseling. But also, what he did is he reached out to the family and invited them to come and see where their mother worked. And remember the
Yeah.
children, like were just absolutely like I'm so appreciative to hear from their mothers, work
Colleagues.
people, their managers, and to see what she was doing day in and day out. And it really healed so, like many hurts from the family, but also the team who were really impacted. And this is just one example of a leader showing, like true vulnerability. And so, as leaders, we really have a choice to make. We can either choose to hide behind the masks of, authority and competency, or we can choose to be authentic and really be vulnerable. And remember, really want to be mindful that this isn't about being overly emotional. It's being self regulated. It's just showing that you have a head and a heart. And, we can choose to build a culture of trust, open communication, and empowerment. So we want to leave you with a bit of a challenge today. And the challenge is, can we really start to be honest with our team members and let them know some of the things that perhaps keep you up at night? You may not need to share everything, but I think there is something about letting them into your world, letting them in to the way in which you operate and how you make decisions. And I just think, as a brief recap, we talked about the importance of vulnerability in leadership. We talked about some misconceptions. We talked about some of the stories and also the benefits. And remember, it is not a weakness, it's such a strength. And, we'd love to hear some examples from you in the comments below of where you've witnessed vulnerability in a leader and how it really affected you or how it affected the team. So let's start a conversation about what it means to be a vulnerable leader, because the world needs better leaders. Don't you think, Michelle?
Without a doubt. And I want to also lead. I want to leave with some practical tips on how to start exploring this, because for some people this is going to be very, very difficult. And it can start by asking for feedback from a colleague, not necessarily your team members. It can be admitting a mistake. And sometimes you actually don't have to start in the workplace. You could start at home, for example, if home is a more sort of giving environment for you. It's little things like that. You can start to flex that muscle and start experimenting with being vulnerable, giving and receiving feedback, asking for feedback, sharing a personal story now and then when it's appropriate. Just little things like that. You can start to, flex this muscle of vulnerability, through
Yeah.
those behaviors.
Absolutely, Michelle. It doesn't always have to be in a team meeting. It can be in a one-on-one. It can be
Yes.
in, like a corridor conversation that you have with someone, but just start. So, we'd love to hear some examples from you in the comments of where you've witnessed vulnerability and the impact that it's had on you. So let's start the conversation.
Mhm.
If you found that video useful, then you'll be sure to find this one useful as well.